Most strategies don't fail because they are wrong. They fail because reality does not behave the way strategy documents assume it will. On paper, strategy looks clean, clear objectives, logical steps, forecasted outcomes. Everything connects. But businesses do not operate on paper. They operate in markets, inside organizations, under pressure, with imperfect information and human behavior. And that difference, between theory and reality, is where good strategies quietly collapse. This is not a story about bad planning. It's about why even well-designed strategies fail once they leave the boardroom. Most people imagine strategy as a blueprint. If the thinking is sound, execution should follow. If execution follows, results should appear. This assumption feels rational. It is also deeply misleading. Strategy is not a set of instructions. It is a set of assumptions. Assumptions about customers. Assumptions about competitors. Assumptions about internal capabilities. Assumptions about timing. When those assumptions are even slightly wrong, the strategy doesn't break immediately. It drifts. And drift is dangerous because it looks like progress, until it doesn't. Most strategies fail in three places. Not in design, not in ambition, but in translation, between vision and action, between intent and behavior, between planning and learning. The problem is not that teams don't understand the strategy. It's that the strategy assumes conditions that no longer exist. Markets shift, customers adapt, competitors react, internal constraints emerge. Strategy remains fixed. Reality does not. Every strategy is built on assumptions that feel reasonable at the time. Customer demand will remain stable. Costs will scale predictably. Processes will support growth. People will align with priorities. None of these assumptions are guaranteed. Yet strategies rarely include mechanisms to challenge them continuously. Once a strategy is approved, it becomes a commitment. Questioning it feels like doubt. Adjusting it feels like failure. So teams protect the strategy instead of testing it. And protection slowly turns into blindness. One of the biggest misunderstandings in business is the belief that execution is a mechanical process. Define goals. Assign responsibilities. Track progress. But execution is human. People interpret priorities differently. Incentives distort behavior. Fear alters decision-making. Politics shape outcomes. A strategy may say, focus on long-term value, but performance reviews reward short-term numbers. A strategy may emphasize innovation, but risk is quietly punished. The gap between what the strategy says and what the organization rewards is where execution breaks down. Not dramatically, gradually. Good strategies often assume ideal organizational behavior, clear communication, aligned teams, rational decision-making. Real organizations are rarely ideal. Information is fragmented. Priorities compete. Authority is uneven. Resources are constrained. When strategy collides with these realities, something has to give. Usually, it's the strategy. Not because it's bad, but because the organization is not built to support it. Successful strategies create confidence. Confidence reduces friction. Friction reduces scrutiny. Scrutiny is where learning happens. As companies experience early success, they stop asking fundamental questions. Is this still working? Or is it just still growing? Is performance driven by strategy? Or by momentum? These questions feel unnecessary when results look good, but momentum hides decay better than failure ever could. At scale, strategies often turn into narratives. Stories about market leadership, stories about differentiation, stories about long-term vision. Narratives are powerful, but dangerous. They simplify complexity. They reduce nuance. They discourage contradiction. Once a strategy becomes a story, evidence that contradicts it feels disruptive rather than informative. So organizations filter reality to protect the narrative. That is not strategy. That is self-deception. Strategy decisions operate on long time horizons. Feedback operates on short ones. This creates a dangerous delay. By the time results reveal that a strategy is flawed, the organization is already deeply invested. Costs are sunk. Structures are built. Reputations are attached. At that point, changing direction feels more painful than continuing. So companies persist, not because the strategy is working, but because stopping feels worse. Failure, when it finally arrives, appears sudden. In reality, it was delayed. Strategies are judged by intent. Markets judge by impact. A company may intend to deliver value. Customers experience friction. A company may intend to innovate. Employees experience constraint. A company may intend to scale efficiently. Operations experience strain. Intent does not protect against consequences. Impact does not care what was planned. And the longer organizations confuse the two, the more disconnected strategy becomes from reality. The most dangerous thing about strategic failure is that it rarely looks like failure at first. Key metrics remain positive. Growth continues. Revenue increases. The signals are subtle. Rising complexity. Slower decisions. Increased coordination costs. More exceptions. More workarounds. These are not alarms. They are whispers. And leaders trained to look for clear signals often miss them. Good strategy is not static. It is iterative, responsive, adaptive. Yet many organizations treat strategy as something to be defended rather than revised. Learning becomes secondary to alignment. Questions become threats. Adaptation becomes hesitation. But strategy without learning is prediction. And prediction, in complex systems, is fragile. Strategies that survive reality share a few characteristics. They are built with uncertainty in mind. They include feedback loops. They allow for reversal. They prioritize adaptability over precision. They focus less on being right, and more on staying relevant. They assume error. They design for correction. Most importantly, they treat strategy as a living process, not a finished document. When strategies fail, they rarely collapse overnight. They erode. Execution becomes heavier. Decisions take longer. Alignment requires more effort. People work harder to achieve less. At that stage, leaders often respond by pushing execution harder. More targets. More accountability. More pressure. But pressure cannot fix structural misalignment. It only hides it temporarily. Good strategies fail not because they are flawed, but because they are treated as answers rather than hypotheses. Because they are protected instead of tested. Because they are defended instead of evolved. In complex environments, correctness is temporary. Relevance is earned repeatedly. The companies that last are not the ones with the smartest strategies. They are the ones that remain willing to revise them. Because in the real world, strategy is not about being right once. It is about staying aligned, as reality keeps changing. And the most dangerous moment in any strategy's life is the moment everyone stops questioning it.